All right, so I want to return to the top American in this race, Nell Rojas, because she made an interesting decision in the lead up to Boston. If you remember last year, she was sixth place, top American as an unsponsored athlete. And she signed with Adidas after that. So she ended 2022 as an Adidas athlete. She was training in their shoes. But then before Boston, she decided the shoes weren't working for her, didn't feel great on her feet. She wanted to go to Boston with footwear that she felt comfortable in, that she, could stand on the start line and be confident. And for her, that was the Nike Alpha Flies. So she decided to end her partnership with Adidas, ran in the Alpha Flies, and finished faster than she did last year, and it's the top American the second year in a row. And this decision, on the men's side, we had a similar situation. Scott Fauble was with Hoka NAZ Elite, and he had time remaining on his contract. He could have been with them through 2022. He decided he needed to leave the group. He wanted to find a different coaching situation, and he latched on with Joe Bosshard. He finishes as a top American and runs a PB of 208.52. Now, it's important to note, Scott, when I talked to him in December when he left the group, he said it was the footwear had nothing to do with it. But it's very interesting to me that the top two Americans in the Boston Marathon, neither of them had shoe contracts, even though they had the chance to do a contract with Adidas and Hoka. And both of them wore the same shoe in the race, the Nike Alpha Fly.
Yeah, John, this is interesting in a lot of different ways. First, I want to point out for the record, Evans Chibet, Perez Jip Church here. They have something in common, John?
They both wore Adidas shoes to win the Boston Marathon on Monday.
Yes, I found that interesting. Nell gives up her contract. The shoes obviously didn't work for her. So she did what she had to do to run well. But if this is a profession, you need to make money. And the question is, is another shoe company going to sign her? Because what if their shoes don't work out for her? You don't want to have the optics of let's say you're a non-Nike, you're a Brooks, and you're like, is she going to sign with me and then dump me in the shoes? I think it's a huge risk factor. I didn't even realize Fauble still had time left in his contract. I think his is a little bit different because he's close to Ben Rosario. He's like, I want to try something else on the coaching front. And it worked really well with him, with Joe Bosshard. But I also found interesting, John, you had some tweets on this pointing out the top American man and woman at the 22 Boston Marathon were unsponsored. Kellen Taylor, a Hoka NAZ elite athlete who was, expected to be one of the top Americans in Boston, but had to drop out with an injury. She chimed in. This isn't that notable. Both had sponsorships and both chose to end them. I totally disagree. I think it's totally notable when, runners, if you're an American runner, your livelihood comes from having a shoe sponsorship. You're giving up your livelihood. I think it's very unusual.
Yeah, of course it's notable. And you can quibble, okay, unsponsored, the traditional sense of how most in the running world think of that is, wow, they don't have a contract and they're not quite good enough to have attracted one yet. They're really grinding. That's not necessarily the case here. These athletes did have offers and chose to end their contracts. But as you also pointed out, it's not like the Adidas shoes are known to be slow. I think we have enough evidence at this point from Adidas athletes running fast and winning races that they seem to be a pretty competitive shoe. And it was just a personal preference. Nell didn't like how the shoes felt. And if she's only feels comfortable racing in the Alpha Flies, then yeah, if she does, she's either going to be unsponsored or she's going to get a low ball offer from Nike because she's sort of locked into that one brand of shoes. Scott Fauble, we don't know. I didn't really ask him how the shoes felt. It is notable that he has been wearing Nikes for his PR in the Houston half and in Boston, but it's also very possible. In fact, I think I did talk to him. Basically, he wasn't just going to take some lowball offer ahead of Boston just to say he had a contract. He had enough built up in savings over the past few years that he could go into this race unsponsored with the thought of, hey, if I run something pretty good, I'm going to get a nice big deal afterwards. I think that will happen. I would be surprised if he just continues to race in the Nike shoes without a deal because he likes them that much. Because this is a guy who ran 209.09 in Hoka non-super shoes in 2019. So I think he will take a deal if it's with the right brand and if it's for the right amount of money.
John, this is a very interesting topic on a number of levels because, first of all, when he ran that 209 before in Hoka's, which is not a super shoe, he had a huge tailwind pushing him. To be honest, if you go from a
huge tailwind
shoe, what?
Huge tailwind, Robert. We ran an article with the report cards. This is revisionist history from you. I don't remember anyone mentioning a huge tailwind at the time. And if you look at our report cards, according to Dark Sky, the wind was 1 to 2 miles per hour on that day. Now, our race recap said 6 miles an hour, but neither of those are huge tailwinds. I think you're just retroactively trying to discredit what was a really impressive race.
Well, I stand corrected then, but it actually helps me make my point even more. I mean, John, you wrote a great article about how Scott Fauble hunted down a PR, and it was amazing. I mean, 64.26, 64.26, dead even, PB. That was great running. To do that second half as fast as the first on those hills was some amazing marathoning. But to be honest, I would expect someone going from a non-super shoes to super shoes to run more than a 17-second PB. And I think maybe the wind made the difference. A slight tailwind before, slight headwind this time. People are saying how much of the shoes. I think they're worth at least a minute. So I'm not convinced that he's in way better shape than he was, before. The thing that I think that is where you and I disagree is I toned down your article a little bit when I was editing, and he'll have tons of suitors. Like, to me, the whole thing is practically charity. Do you think these runners are really selling $75,000 worth of shoes, $100,000 worth of shoes? One individual runner is not. Now, the brand image to Nike is worth billions with a B altogether, all their athletes, but any individual runner is pretty much disposable. I mean, do you think Scott Fauble will ever make an Olympic team? He's 30. He very well could. I mean, Jake Riley made an Olympic team at 32 last time. He's a better marathoner than Jake, I would say. But like Jake Riley, are tons of people going out, and buying? He got a deal after making the team. Is everybody going out and buying On shoes now that Jake Riley was 34th in the Boston Marathon this weekend, or where did he finish?
Well, people are buying On shoes, though. I think. Look, here's the thing. If you want to say you're singling out Scott for an industry-wide issue, like, are people going to buy all these new shoes because Scott Fauble signs the new brand? Well, probably not, but you could say the same about all these other people. The fact is, right now, you would have to say he's probably the second best marathoner in America behind Galen Rupp, who this year has not been Galen Rupp so far. That guy should have a contract, just the way that the world works. Like, is he a magnetic personality? I wouldn't say that, but he's a decent guy, and you run 208, people are going to want to sponsor a 208 marathoner, Robert.
Okay, a couple points, John. He had a contract. He gave up the contract, so maybe that's what Kellen Taylor's getting at. And this was a good run by Scott. I think being one of the top American marathoners is going to get you a contract, but 208 on its own, 208 is the old 212 or something. It's for Americans, it's good. Big scheme of things, worldwide, not. But back to your Twitter thread. Supporters Club member Des Linden. You guys should join Supporters Club. Let'sRun.com/subscribe. You can save up to 20% on running shoes. She ran the Boston Marathon, guys. In case you've forgotten, she is the only American woman to win the Boston Marathon in 30 years? 40 years?
She won in 2018. The previous American women's winner before that was 1985, so 33 years.
Well, almost 40 years from now, 37 years from now. But she replied to your tweet, John, and Kellen's tweet. It said, "This is terrible for the sport. It's reverting to amateurism, another product of the shoe wars that we always knew was coming." And first, I need to make sense of this comment. I think she's saying that if one company has a product that's better than everyone else, it creates an unfair advantage, and then some people are just going to they don't have a choice. They want to perform at their best, or do they want to make a living and they have to make a choice? Is that what she's getting at?
Yes, she's saying essentially that we're at the point where certain athletes would rather run unsponsored in Nikes than take a shoe contract because they're worried that their performance is not going to be as good in the other shoes. I don't know if that's exactly what's going on here, because we've said Adidas has a shoe that seems to be pretty competitive. Nell Rojas personally doesn't like it as much as the Nike ones, but a lot of other athletes have run plenty faster than it. Scott Fauble, likewise, he said that shoes were not the reason he left at Hoka. Now, maybe he's not telling the truth here, but that's what he claims. I think the best example of what Dez is saying here is Jake Riley, because look at him. He goes to Chicago in 2019, finishes as the top American there. Then before the Olympic trials, chooses not to take a contract so he can run in the Nike shoes. He makes the Olympic team, then he signs with On. He really hasn't done anything since signing with On. He would be the example you point to as someone who said, no, I'm definitely staying unsponsored so I can run in the very best shoe. But it's not quite that simple with Fauble or Rojas in this situation. Now, if Fauble moves on and says, okay, I'm not taking another deal this fall because I think the Nikes give me a better advantage than, brand X, maybe that's the case. But I think Riley's the best example of what Dez is getting at.
Well, with Riley, I'm not totally sure what you're trying to say. He gave up the shoe for one race and made the Olympic team. But are you trying to apply him coming through? All right, here's a trivia question. What do you guys think Jake Riley came through halfway in Boston this year?
70 minutes.
I have no idea.
Close, John. 68.36. He finishes in 2:30.48. We actually left him off our men's report card. I mean, that's an F. But, John, that has nothing to do with the shoes. He's just not running well right now. Are you trying to imply that he's not running well now because of the shoes? I mean,
no. That's a fair point. I'm not trying to say exactly that, but I'm saying, do I think On's marathon shoes are on the same level as the Vaporfly or Alphafly? We don't have enough evidence of that at this point to say yes. But my assumption would be yes. He's not running well for other reasons, but I don't think the shoes are helping him.
Right. And back to what you're saying about the Adidas shoes or whatnot, you said something like evidence since they may be good enough. That's not doing it if you're an elite athlete. They may not be hindering them, essentially, is kind of what you're saying. This is these people's career. The idea of World Athletics has created a huge problem, and we act like it's fine, and it's still a huge problem. They need to have guidelines in place. No technology can be copyrighted if it's going to be in the elite shoe. I think that's where we need to go. The technology needs to be available to everyone. The technology, you can whatever. So let's say, what if Nike, now they don't have exclusive right to the foam, which I think is the most important thing, but we shouldn't have a proprietary device that determines who wins races. So they need to change the rules, open it up. So thankfully, the foam isn't exclusive, but what if the foam was exclusive? Everyone who's just not Nike would be completely screwed. And I think some of these other shoes, the problem is Nike sponsors the top athletes. So is it the shoe? Is it the athlete? Whatever. Adidas has the next best stable of athletes. So maybe their shoes are equal, but maybe also they just have the runner who might be almost as good as the Nike one, and the Nike guy has a bad day, he beats him. So we don't really know. But this is a problem. I love Dez's comments.
I think, yeah, you definitely are right in that we don't know definitively, but I would say a number of the other shoe companies have started to basically copy what Nike was doing. Maybe they haven't done the exact same thing, but they've used that as the basis to create their own super shoes. And look at some of the top American performances. Sarah Hull broke the American record in the half marathon in January wearing Asics. She was second in the London Marathon a couple of years ago wearing Asics. Molly Seidel was third in the Olympic Marathon wearing Puma, who basically was sponsoring no road runners as of about 3 years ago. I think a lot of these companies do have shoes that are at least comparable to the Nikes now. Not all of them, but
John, Eliud Kipchoge won the Berlin Marathon with a Nike shoe with his flap flapping out, a non-super shoe. I mean, people can have great performances with shitty shoes. I'm not saying these are shitty shoes, but just because one athlete does something doesn't mean it's fair. Maybe Puma shoes just as good, but it's going to take so long to figure this out. World Athletics, at the very least, should be demanding testing on these shoes because we need to know what the playing field's like. Golf does this, right? Golf looks at the equipment, tests the equipment, makes rules for the equipment. And we're not doing this with shoes. And I thought I had gotten off this topic for a long time. I didn't think we were worried about competitive balance anymore because we're like, oh, everybody's caught up. But when Des Linden says, this is a product, the shoe wars that we knew were coming, it sounds like she doesn't think it's a level playing field.
Well, I think what it does is it restricts the number of brands you might be willing to sign with, right? Because if you're confident that the brand you're signing with has a shoe that's comparable to the Nikes, which we know are good and are basically the best. If you sign with a brand that you think is comparable to that, then yeah, you're going to feel fine. But in the past, that wasn't even an issue, right? Like when you were signing with a brand, most of the time you would say, oh, all the racing shoes are pretty much equal, right? And you're just going to sign with whoever pays you the most money. And now it's something that you have to factor in. And it might mean that your options are only 5 shoe companies where it might have been 8 in the past. Do you think that's accurate?
No, I think the numbers are much more limited. There aren't a lot of shoe companies with a lot of resources. There's not 8 shoe companies vying for most American people. A lot of people, it might be 2 or 3 companies. So it's a problem.
I feel like I'm listening to a podcast from 2019 where we're ranting about shoes, but I see what Des is saying. But to me, there's more shoe wars than ever. We have Brooks, we have On with the team, we have Puma with the team, we have Reebok with the team, we have Nike with several teams, we have Team Minnesota Elite, we have there's Hanson's, Brooks. I'm leaving out just a bunch of people. Like, we've never had more people running post-collegiately getting paid in America than ever before. So I will leave that topic on a high note. Can we move? Have we talked about the men's race? I don't know. We've been talking so much originally about the women's race and now the shoes. I don't know if we've even analyzed the men's elite race in Boston.
We have not. So let's go there now.